Rail, A CO2 Bigfoot by Investors Business Daily. Read by OutloudOpinion.com. June 16, 2009. Environment. Global warming alarmists are incessantly preaching the virtues of mass transit and condemning as evil the cars most of us get around in. Turns out their paradigm is a bit flawed. Herding large numbers of commuters into buses and trains has been a goal of environmentalist groups for some time. They tend not to like cars because cars represent freedom and independence from central planners. They especially loathe SUVs because they see them as symbols of crass wealth and excessive consumption. Initially, these groups wanted cars off the roads and replaced with mass transit under the pretense that they emitted too much pollution. Now, the environmentalists and their allied policymakers are saying that automobile use should be limited because their engines discharge carbon dioxide. This, according to the eco-faith, is causing global warming, though there's no scientific evidence, just an assumption to back up the claim. The environmental left is also campaigning against airplane travel, unless the travel is being done by one of their alarmist heroes and the carbon he or she discharges while jetting about is for the purpose of cutting future carbon emissions. What will be their reaction then when they learn that the automobiles they've been demonizing are in some cases better choices than the public cattle cars they want the masses to ride in? Environmental engineers Mikhail Chester and Arpad Horpath of the University of California have dented the long-held conviction that taking public transportation across town will always leave a smaller carbon footprint than traveling that same route in an SUV. Quote, "Although mass transit is often touted as more energy efficient than cars, this is not always the case," unquote, Chester told NewScientist.com. Chester and Horvath went beyond using tailpipe emissions, which are typically used as the yardstick, as the measure of carbon output. By including the full life cycles of 11 modes of transportation along with the tailpipe emissions, they were able to get a clearer picture of how different choices compare with each other. This required them to figure in the emissions that are discharged when building the infrastructure that supports the different modes and the maintenance of that infrastructure over its lifetime. Variables such as the energy burned to keep lights and escalators running at train stations, the emissions discharged in the manufacture of cars, planes, and trains, and fuel and power distribution were also included in their calculations. The researchers indeed found that energy-intensive infrastructure operations and maintenance increase the carbon footprint of rail commuting more than they do cars and light trucks, which include SUVs. Their work showed, quote, that total life cycle energy inputs and greenhouse gas emissions contribute an additional 63% for on-road, 155% for rail, and 31% for air systems over vehicle tailpipe operation, unquote. With the full life cycle factored in, public transit still lags behind autos in greenhouse gas output. But when the researchers brought passenger occupancy into the equation, though, a different story emerged. They found that cars and SUVs are often, quote, greener, unquote, than the environmentalists preferred for everyone else modes of transportation. Quote, an SUV, which is one of the worst energy performers, with 2 passengers is equivalent to a bus with 8 passengers, unquote, write Chester and Horvath. Quote, similarly, commuter rail at 34% occupancy, 147 passengers, is equivalent to a bus with 13 passengers or a sedan with 1 passenger, unquote. With so much emphasis placed today on CO2, it's easy to miss the fact that when it comes to a real pollutant, such as sulfur dioxide, thought to be responsible for causing and worsening respiratory and cardiovascular ailments, rail fares poorly when compared with cars. Meanwhile, the political class, driven by radical elements who've successfully enlisted well-meaning but exploitable Americans, continues its campaign against carbon dioxide, which is not a pollutant no matter what politicians say. Wouldn't the public policy debate, the one Al Gore doesn't want to have, be more productive if the study's results were brought into it? Trouble is, the alarmists, who are largely in control of the debate, don't want it known that they might have been wrong for all of these years. Copyright Investors Business Daily. Read by OutloudOpinion. For more podcasts, go to ibdeditorials.com and outloudopinion.com.